All right, students, as you can tell, I'm not here today, which is why you're watching a video of my face. We're going to go ahead today and go over what you're supposed to be doing so that you completely understand everything, there's no confusion, um, and you're good to go. Okay, the very first thing that you want to do, if you haven't already, is pick up the handouts from the front table and also get out the claim handout from yesterday that we were working on in class. Um, in my second and fourth period classes, we were able to finish doing the examples on the front side of that page, but we didn't do the back side. Sixth period, we didn't get to yet go over the examples, but that's okay. We're also going to move on to the back side of that handout. After we finish doing the claim handout, we're going to go ahead and do the quote integration one that you guys picked up when you walked in today. And then if you have time after that in the period, you're going to start working on your short story test study guide. Okay, so that's essentially what's happening here today. Now, one major thing that I do want to note that it says on the bottom of your agenda slide here is house points. A lot of house points are up for grabs today. And you guys can get house points in a variety of ways, but primarily they all boil down to good behavior. Okay, if you are not shouting across the room and causing disruptions, if you are staying in your seat and getting your work done, if you are turning in your phones, at least 10 of them, if you are working and focused for the entire period, if you leave and push your chair in, if there's no garbage on the floor when you leave, all of those kinds of things are going to get you guys house points today. So doing essentially all the good behavior that you should be doing all the time, but especially because I'm not there and there's a sub you should be doing, are going to get you a bunch of house points today. There's more than 100 house points up for grabs today. 25 additional ones are listed here on the screen right now. So the sub is going to decide at the end of the day who they think was the most well-behaved class all day long. That class is going to get an additional 25 house points on top of all the other 100 house points or whatever for just being the most well-behaved class. So keep that in mind. I will say sixth period is ahead right now, but they're not 150 points ahead of other people. So, you know, still things are still up for grabs before the end of the quarter this Friday. All right. So, anyways, there's that. There's my little house point behavior spiel. Um, since I'm not here today and I can't watch you guys. All right. Very first thing that you want to do is get out that claim handout. We did the front side already. You guys and I yesterday we did the example claim writing, the RA. And as a reminder, when we're writing the claims here, we're writing our RAs, you need to do a couple things. One, you need to ensure that you are taking the keywords out of the question and adding it into your answer. And then I said like a couple of do not do's and one definitely do. I said, do not say yes or no at the start of your response. Do not say I think, I believe, I feel, right? Because we don't want to sound wishy-washy. We're trying to make an argument. We got to be straight in the argument. We're not involved. No first person eyes. And also I said make sure you have your because statements. You need your reasoning for why you should do what you're saying you're going to do. So on the back side of that claim handout, here is the RA, the claim that really matters, because you guys are going to be writing your race response over this prompt here on the back in bold. Okay, so it says write your own claim for the prompt, the RA part of race, below. Your prompt is, at the end of Kate Chopin's The Story of an Hour, what is ultimately the cause of Mrs. Mallard's death? Okay. Now, I've got to get all the key things here from this question into my answer. We need the author, because I've got the author name. We need the story. I got the story name. We need what is ultimately the cause of her death. So now I can take this and I can kind of restate it as my answer. I like ultimately. That's a good word. So I'm going to start with ultimately. The cause of Mrs. Mallard's death in Kate Chopin's The Story of an Hour is, haha, I'm not giving you the answer. You might have thought I was going to, but I'm not. Okay? So you're going to write what you think the answer is to that question. Now, your start of your sentence does not have to sound exactly like mine as long as you have the key things. You have the cause of Mrs. Mallard's death, you have the author, you have the story title. It might be slightly in a different order there at the start of this sentence. It doesn't have to be exactly like that. And then you've got to have your answer. What is ultimately the cause of her death? Now I need, after that, a because statement. Why do I think that was ultimately the cause of her death? Because what? And period. And then I'll be good. Then I've got my claim. You have to have a strong claim, though, before you move on, because otherwise you're going to have no idea what quote to look for, how to explain that quote. So we have to have strong claims here in our race responses. All right? So go ahead and do that. Once you've done that, you're going to go ahead and move on to this next assignment. Okay? For right now, I'm going to tell you to just move on to this next assignment. You can go back and write your RA if you're not done with it. Here's another thing that we struggle with, and it's not just you guys, it's anyone your age, because for most of the time, when you guys have done a lot of these integrating quote pieces in your writing, your teacher would let you get away with so and so said, or she did, or they said, blah, blah, blah. And that was it. That was all you were writing to integrate these quotes. We're going to get a little more sophisticated. When you guys go into junior year, when you go into senior year in those AP courses, saying the character so and so said, it's not enough. It's not enough to integrate a quote or introduce a quote. Okay? We need to be a little bit more in depth when we do those kinds of things. So on this next handout, what we're doing is we're looking at 3 better, stronger ways that we can introduce quotes in our writing and integrate them a little bit better. Now, we got to make sure that our reader has context, because when your reader is reading your paragraph, they might not have read The Story of an Hour before, right? So they don't have all the background information. They don't have all the knowledge about what's going on in the story. And when you just drop a quote on someone's head and they have never read the story, they have no idea what's going on in that quotation. Okay, so we got to make sure that we give them a little bit more context in our quote introduction before we even get to the quote, so that they're not completely lost. And there's a few ways that we can do this. Okay, the first one that we've got here is just simply alerting to the reader to who you're quoting with a signal phrase, lead in, and a comma. So I gave you some examples here that are a little bit random. They have nothing to do with the Story of an Hour, but you can kind of see how this would work. Theater critic Rohan Preston observes, comma, quote, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and then I've got director Lou Bellamy has a way, and I'm just giving the quote there. Okay, that's one way. You could say, according to the theater critic, blah, 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 quote. Now, that's not super helpful in reference to a character, right? In this case, you would say something like, in the story, character so-and-so says to character so-and-so, comma, quote. Or in the story, before the character leaves the building, he says to everyone, comma, quote. A little bit more context there is going to be very helpful. Just because they don't know what the characters are doing in the story, right? Give them a little bit more. I gave you some other signal verbs that you could use before you give me the quote here. Things like agrees, asserts, claims, comments, compares, illustrates, implies, observes. All of those are good verbs that you could use to introduce a quote. Now you got to make sure it makes sense with what you're doing. Like I wouldn't say a character observes when they're just telling us how they feel, right? They're not observing anything in that quote. So make sure that you're choosing verbs there that actually make sense given your character and what they're doing in the story. All right. The second way to integrate a quote here is to do a complete sentence with your quote integrated into that sentence. So instead of saying he said, she said, comma, whatever, now I'm making it part of the quote almost so strongly that I could take those quotation marks out of the sentence and a reader wouldn't necessarily know where my quote ended or where my words ended and their quote began. They're not going to be able to tell that difference. So here we go. It says, Rohan Preston suggests that Bellamy is a skillful director because he, quote, has a way of looking so deeply into the theatergoer's soul, blah, blah, blah. Right? If I didn't put that quotation mark there, you probably wouldn't know where the quote was supposed to start. Right? This is a very sophisticated way of introducing quotes and making sure that your words are the focus in your writing and not the thing that you're quoting. Right? Ultimately, a quote in a paragraph like this is only supposed to serve your analysis. It shouldn't take over your paragraph. This is one of those ways that you can signal to your reader that my thoughts are my own. I'm only using this quote to kind of show you something, right? I'm so sophisticated in my writing, I can make it sound like it's part of my sentence, and you wouldn't know unless I put it in quotation marks. Okay, so that's a second way that we could do that. The third way that we could do this is by giving a colon after your stated claim or background information, and then giving the quote. Now, when you use a colon, which is those two dots, you have to make sure that the part before the colon is a complete thought, complete sentence. It has to stand alone on its own. So it says here, Preston demonstrates that director Lou Bellamy knows how to get the audience involved. Complete sentence, colon, quote. Members often call out involuntarily to the characters, so on and so forth, right? So in that case, after the word involved, that is a complete, or before the word involved, that is a complete sentence that can stand alone all by itself. So that's the third way that we can do this. All of these things are more sophisticated than he said, she said, so-and-so said. Right? We need to get a little bit better about that. All right, so the next thing you're going to do is we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts where we are going to practice doing a quote integration. Now, the other thing that you're going to note here is I put page number and author titles. We got to do those in-text citations. Some of you guys never do them, and we got to do them here. I'm going to do number 1 with you guys, and I'm going to do number 1 in each of the 3 ways that I just discussed you can do a quote integration, because we got to practice that. Now, I'm only asking you to do one way, okay? I want you to mix it up and try all the different ways, but you don't have to do all 3 ways on one question. You just need to do one for each question. I'm going to do all 3 just as an example for you guys. All right, so my first quote here, it says, "Believe you can and you're halfway there." This is a quote from Theodore Roosevelt, and it was apparently on page 3 or whatever it was, of whatever it was. Okay, probably a speech or something is what I'm guessing here. Okay, so I'm going to do the first one, and it tells me the first way to integrate a quote is with a short signal phrase, lead-in, and a comma. So I'm going to say, in his speech, remember I'm giving context, I'm telling you where it came from. In his speech, President Theodore Roosevelt asserted, there you go, that's a good word, believe you can and you're halfway there. Now, I got to do my in-text citation. When I do an in-text citation, again, no comma, no period, nothing. I just end my quote. I start my parentheses. I put my author's last name, which in this case is Roosevelt. And then I put the page number, which in this case was page 3. End parentheses, period. Done. Quote integration. I gave them some context. I said it was in a speech. I said who it was, and I said that he asserted something. I said that he asserted. Now, my next way of doing a quote integration is to make it part of the complete sentence. In order to do this, I got to make up a fake scenario. Why would I be making an argument about believing you can and being halfway there? Let's see, how can I do this? I'm going to show you guys a new way of integrating a quote, which you probably have not done before. Are you ready? So we're making this part of our grammar of our sentence. Okay, let's do this. So I'm going to say, when President Teddy Roosevelt told his audience that they should, comma, quote. Now, if you are going to change anything in a quote ever, you have to put it in something called brackets. They look like this, right? Not the parentheses which are rounded, but the squared ones. That's hard to do on camera. The squared ones, okay? That's a bracket. You put brackets in whenever you're going to change anything. Anything at all, even if it's just making something lowercase that was capitalized or capitalized that was lowercase. If you change anything in a quote, you have to put it in brackets. So that's what I'm going to have to do here, because I'm going to have to change the format of this quote so it makes sense with my sentence. So if I put, when President Teddy Roosevelt told his audience that they should, bracket, believe, I changed it to lowercase, they can, I changed it to they, I need to put they, can, and they're halfway there, he was trying to instill a sense of hope and purpose. All right. Now, I don't have a quote there. My quote was in the center of the sentence, but I still got to put my in-text citation. So I'm going to write Roosevelt 3, period. Now, in this case, I put brackets where I changed things, right? I made believe lowercase. I changed you to they. I changed your to their. Okay, but the content's basically the same. All right, I've made it integrated into my sentence so that if I took the quotes out, it'd almost be really hard to tell where the quote was. When President Teddy Roosevelt told his audience that they should believe they can and they're halfway there, he was trying to instill a sense of hope and purpose. I wouldn't have known without the quotation marks and the brackets and stuff that I was actually quoting something. That's a good quote integration. All right, and the last option here, we're trying to write it with a complete sentence and a colon. So I'm going to say, along the same lines, President Teddy Roosevelt wanted to instill a sense of hope and purpose in his audience. Colon. Believe you can and you're halfway there. Roosevelt 3, period. Now I've integrated it 3 separate ways. Now, again, you only had to do it one way, but I was trying to give you guys examples of all 3 ways because you're going to have to do the other examples too. All right. I threw you a couple curveballs too to see what you would do. So if you look at question 2, there has been a rapid spread of the virus in the last 2 days. The author was Will Bellamy. Publication was the article Coronavirus Outbreak in the New York Times. It was no page number. If you're doing an in-text citation, you don't have a page number. You just write author last name, and that's it. So at your end of your step, you're going to put Bellamy, no page number. You just put nothing. Okay. Next quote: less than 2% of the population is at major risk. Is in the article Viral Effects in the Indianapolis Star on page 8. Author was Amy Kincaid. So I'm going to put Kincaid 8 for my in-text citation there, because I do have a page number. But I'll have to decide how I want to integrate that quote. How am I going to introduce it? Okay, try again to use the different ways. And the last one we've got, love is the, or sorry, 2 more. Love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend. Martin Luther King Jr. Okay, his name is Luther King. All right, and then quotation. Each person must live their life as a model for others. Parks, page 56. Okay, so I'll have to make sure that I integrate that quote. Now, when you finish all the practice, then you're trying your quote integration for your own essay. For your own, not essay, but race response. Okay? So we got at the end of Kate Chopin's The Story of an Hour, what is ultimately the cause of Mrs. Mallard's death? I have to copy over my claim that I already wrote. So on my previous assignment, I got to copy what I wrote. I can just copy and paste, but you got to actually put it. Okay? Oop, I put it in the wrong spot. Right. Okay. So I've got my claim that I can now look at. And now I got to introduce, quote, and cite a quote from the story that's going to help. So I've got to decide what quote could I use. I'm going to do my quote integration just like we practiced. I'm going to write the quote. I'm going to cite the quote. Now, in this case, when it asks for a page number, just treat the page of the packet that you're reading as the page number. So there's only 3 pages. It'll be page 1, page 2, or page 3 when you're citing. Okay? All right. If something happens, if you get a major question, you can't figure it out, you need to ask me. Send me an email, message me on Classroom, and I can help you. But for the most part, this should be kind of review, just with a little bit of new stuff for you guys here. All right? So that's the first thing. Let's say you finish all that. You're on the ball. You're ready to go. You're done. Now you can work on your test study guide. Your test in here is going to be on Friday. It is going to be on the Chromebooks. We're going to do a Chromebook test, okay, which I don't normally do. I usually do physical copies, but it'll make it a little bit easier on you guys if you're just doing it on the Chromebook. All right, the thing that you're going to do for the study guide is this. I list a bunch of literary terms that you have to define, okay? You want to define all those elements of literature, the literary devices, all that stuff. And then you've got some elements of literature that you're defining and mentioning from all the short stories that we read. So we read The Old Man at the Bridge, The Most Dangerous Game, The Veldt, The Cask of Amontillado, and The Story of an Hour. you're going to identify the devices listed above as they relate to your story. So in The Most Dangerous Game, was there foreshadowing? What was it? Was there irony? Yes. What was it? Was there a mood that we discussed? Yes. Right? What was it? So you're going to define all of those things there um, as they relate to the story. And then again, what is the point of view, the setting, the characters, blah blah blah. So it's a good way to like get you back to the story, thinking about all those literary elements and things that we've been discussing. And then also, excuse me, what I get for being sick. Okay. Anyway, also the thing that's going to help you a lot on this test is making sure that you review the stories. So I would highly suggest reading back through them at least once before Friday to kind of get yourself prepared for it. On the bottom of the page, it says you'll receive extra credit on the test itself if this is completely done on a separate sheet of paper on the day of the test. So on Friday, if your study guide is completely done, you're going to get extra credit on the test just by having it done. Okay? The test itself, I'm going to go over the format of it later with you guys, but essentially it's going to be a lot of multiple choice until the end, and then you're going to have a race response question. A quick one that you're doing on the test, not one that we're spending days working on. All right? Okay. If you have questions about that, feel free to let me know again on Classroom or elsewhere. All right, guys, that is all I've got today. I know I've been talking for a while. Hopefully you've been paying attention. But at this point, I'm going to let you guys go ahead and start working on those quote integrations and the claim assignments. If you need to get help from a neighbor, like somebody sitting to the left or the right of you because you're lost, feel free to quietly chat with a neighbor to do that. But we're not getting up around the room. We're not moving around and doing all that stuff. Stay where you are. That way it makes it a little bit easier for the sub to keep track of what's going on. All right. House points up for grabs today. Make sure we're behaving and doing those things we need to be doing. I'll see you guys tomorrow.